My name's Meredith Ellis. I'm a rancher in North Central Texas. I kind of wanted to talk to you guys about just my perceptions and my feelings about precision grazing technology and accounting for the gray area. So when I talk about the gray area, I talk about like really small, ephemeral elements that affect our decision process that when they're all added up together create uncertainty and in turn have an enormous effect on the land, cattle health, those types of things. And I know I only have 15 minutes to share with you guys, so I'm thinking, how the best to go about really helping you guys understand what I'm talking about when I refer to the gray area. And what I decided was to kind of just show you some real the decision making process on our ranch, basically. So just as an overview, our ranch is 3,000 acres. So on the far left of your screen, it's like that hot pink line is the boundary line of our land. The white is permanent fencing, basically. So that's barbed wire fencing. These fences are further subdivided with temporary electric fencing right now. But just to show you like the initial complexity, these pastures can range anywhere from 500 acres to 1.5 acres. And along with that process is that we have about 1,000 acres of native grassland. We also have an additional 1,000 acres of forested area, a lot of topography. And then we have about 850 acres of introduced coastal Bermuda. And then we have about 6% of our land is considered cropland, but that's exclusively for grazing. So we have winter wheat in the cool season and then no-till cover crop mix in the warm season that is also grazed, abiding by those principles of soil health. But if you overlay basically our pasture boundaries with our ecological zones within our ranch, our major ecological zones based on soil type, you can see that complexity of like that thin soil layer tends to be overgrazed, that thicker soil layer, that really rich bottomland tends to be undergrazed. And so kind of mitigating that with our temporary fencing is something that we're doing currently. Apps that I use and I love right now. This is the home screen on my phone. Obviously, I have 4 weather apps, so I kind of go to each one and kind of get a consensus of like what's going to happen. We can get 1.5 inches of rain on the north side of our property and 0.5 inch of rain on the south side of our property. So it varies, but rainfall obviously is something that's critical to our operation. Also, I get a lot of my best tips from, ironically, YouTube and other ranchers that I look to and admire, just doing really practical, mundane stuff like Greg Judy unrolling bales in a ditch for erosion control. There's this guy that manages goats, and he's just basically setting up electric fences on his 4-wheeler. Those types of just really bottom line basic things are incredibly helpful to me as a rancher. These 2 apps, iNaturalist and Merlin Bird, are 2 apps that I think there needs to be more attention paid to those as far as ecosystem management and the health of our rangelands, and feedback on whether or not us ranchers are doing a good job for the ecosystem. So for example, like Merlin Bird ID, I can hold my phone up, take a sound recording, and hear various rangeland birds. And I think those birds to me are like canaries in the coal mine. And so they're not going to be present on that land unless they have food and shelter and habitat required to maintain that population. So that's almost kind of like a no-brainer as to incorporate the data from Merlin Bird ID and iNaturalist into our management management style to really gauge our ecosystem health. I also use Soil Web for biodiversity assessments that I do twice a year. Maya grazing, I've been using that for a couple of years. I have not taken full advantage of the software right now. I'm strictly using it for grazing records. Land PKS, I don't use that, but that kind of is incorporating a lot of these elements into one app. I see some potential within that app in the future, but I do not use it. And then Angus Mobile, so we have a cow-calf operation. We run Black Angus, and we rely on those genetics from our cattle to try to select for genetics of an efficient cow. So small frame size, maternal quality, sustainability, and efficiency over those high performance EPDs is what we're selecting for. And we keep our own replacement females in our herd. And then I use Google Earth a lot, actually. And I'll show you how I do that. And then last, photos. I take photos of the land all the time. So when cows are first going into a pasture, when cows are leaving a pasture, and I can go back in previous years to see what were we doing last February, where were our cattle at. I can go back and see a picture or take a picture of a pasture that was amp grazed 14 days later and understand the effects of like my management decisions. Being able to look back is a key resource for us in knowing if we made the right decision or not. So yeah, this is like very not high tech, but this is literally what we do. So this is our pasture outline on a board with a piece of tracing paper overlaid from it. And this system was a group of 93 cows were coming from the Fisher pasture, which is a 500-acre pasture that's not even on this map. They were starting here. I hope you can see my cursor on this number 2 area. And basically we wanted to, if I remember correctly, it was 57 days that they needed to amp graze all from the north end of our property all the way down to the very south end. By December 29th was the date that we needed them to be in that pasture. Because that was their due date. The New Year's Day was when they were calving, so we wanted them to be in the pasture that we wanted them to calve in by December 29th. And so this is like what our grazing plan looks like. And so the black lines that I did with the pen are basically where the electric fence was going. So for example, if you look on the right side, I use Google Earth. I know these pastures like the back of my hand. So on the right side of this image over here, this is really good bottomland, really high quality forages for the cattle. And then on the left side, you've got some pretty thin topsoil layer that needs to be handled sensitively and not overgrazed. And then over here on this bottomland, it's really seepy area. So you've got like a lot of seep, muley, bushy bluestem, a lot of wooded areas that do not have ample forages. So my estimate for my counting was that they would be on the right side of this pasture for 2 days and on the left side of the pasture for 1 day. And that was just an estimate, as you know, we made our way from the north side of the property all the way to the south side. But that's like kind of what it looks like on our ranch. And then this is just showing you kind of the management, like, so this is on the right side of that pasture. It's got some, you know, you can see some little blue stem, Johnson grass, KR blue stem, big blue stem, a little bit of Bermuda in there. Just all your major grasses are in there. It's really thick. There's a lot. And then on the left side, again, this is probably soil type number 47, which is really thin. You can see nature's cover crop. So you've got like some broomweed, really thin topsoil layer. Didn't want to hit that very hard. So they were just in there for a matter of hours rather than a long time. And that's kind of the decision that we made to cross fence that pasture. And, I have 58, major wired fences. I could spend 15 minutes within each pasture explaining the decision process made. But this is kind of what we're looking for right here. Like after they're done grazing, we've got a good laydown of oxidized material, making contact with the soil, so insulating it from those freezing days, protecting the soil from solar radiation, starting that decomposition between that oxidized material. So when the spring regrowth occurs, we've got a really great bounce back. All of my decisions and where I'm really trusting is the power of observation and going in there every day and watching the cattle. What are they eating? What are they doing? How are they behaving? And I'm always looking at manure scores. So making sure that they're getting that proper protein to carb ratio is something that's extremely important to me as well. But this is kind of like what we're looking for. This is another example. So on the right side, that was just grazed, and we had just moved the cattle on the left side of the electric fence. But just kind of showing that before and after of what we're observing, what we're looking for to help us make those decisions on when to move our cattle. Kind of outliers and, things that go unnoticed is a lot of places where I really want that electric fence to go are extremely hard to put the electric fence. So yes, I do see great opportunity in that fence technology, but literally I had to tunnel through this brush to put that wire, that hot wire where I wanted it to go so that cattle could graze appropriately. Also at this time, during this time of the year, we had an endangered orchid that was growing on our land. That's something that's completely not accounted for, in any type of grazing technology or whatever. But, is that important as far as ecosystem health? I mean, if you're grazing and you're trampling endangered orchids, that doesn't seem like, a very good thing to do. But, I guess I'm just trying to stress like the conservation of species, the ecosystem health as a network of living things. How can we tie those things into the health of the land, the health of our cattle, maintaining ecosystem resilience, those types of things? I think we need to pay more attention to these, ephemeral species. And then showing one of the things I really am keen on is it would be great to have just even on a per pasture basis, just satellite imagery where red is overgrazed and green is undergrazed or underutilized. But then when I think about, how helpful that would be, I also think about these areas that, on a satellite image, would this image, this few acres right here be considered undergrazed? Because this is very low quality forage for our cattle. They would avoid this area. So it's very seepy. So you've got seep, muley, bushy, blue stem. So there's some inaccuracies as far as biomass and forage quality, how to account for those, how to estimate, those types of things. Another thing that's a huge problem that, you plant, this is a 28-acre pasture that we planted in winter wheat, and this is all hog damage. So about 25% of our crop was completely decimated by by hog damage. And so that's something that we didn't plan for, but we have to respond to and account for as well. And so, if I have a grazing software or something that says, yes, you have 20 acres of wheat planted, and so you have this many pounds of biomass per acre, that's not really necessarily accounting for the devastation that just occurred in this pasture. And so we've got, an issue there as well. And then so in the process of moving this group of 93 from the north end to the south end, just kind of outlying questions that I had. I went to the grass-fed exchange a few years ago, and there was a presenter that was bragging about his cattle eating prickly pear and that they just loved them and it was good for them. And so when I came in the pasture, I saw 3 different mamas eating prickly pear. And I thought, oh, they've their manure score looks excellent. They're not asking for groceries. Their body condition score looks great. I think they're just like enjoying this prickly pear. And my dad and our ranch manager saw that, and they said, oh my gosh, no, they are lacking nutrients. They are going to get wood tongue, and this is not a good thing at all. I think we need to move them. And so, what's correct? What nutrients were they getting? I was lacking information. Ironically, at that exact same time, A&M AgriLife Extension came out and took fecal samples. And so I will get results on what exactly their nutrition level was during that time, to see, what was going on. But these are just kind of like gray areas of like, decisions that we're making, behaviors of our cattle that are mysteries. So during that same time, we've got a lot going on. During that same time that group of 93 was moving from the north end of our property to the south end, we had a group of 58 very pregnant heifers that were spending time in a 100-acre pasture doing some amp grazing themselves. And so I wanted to show you the difference between the data entry, the official data entry, and what really occurred. So like the official data entry that I entered into my grazing is on the left-hand side of the screen. So I entered 58 heifers grazed to the house pasture for 10 days. And so that's this pasture right here, and they were in it for 10 days. But what actually happened was not at all that simple. So we amp graze this pasture in several locations, and 58 pastures did not just spend 10 days, or 58 heifers did not just spend 10 days in this pasture. They spent 24 hours in each paddock, except for this larger paddock, which had a significant amount of biomass, and they spent 3 days in that pasture. Again, this was like morning and afternoon observations of what the cattle were doing, what impact they were having on the land, manure scores and the like on, okay, they're done, let's move them, that type of stuff. And so, the data doesn't account for the fact that they ate acorns and poison ivy and loved it down in this corner. It doesn't account for the fact that this long skinny paddock right here, the only water source was right here. And so the trample and the effect that the cattle had, was disproportionate, because of the shape of this paddock. Also topography, there's no way they could get on this cliff to graze. Also due to road access, they didn't even graze this whole right side of the pasture, which, for me being an observation freak, it helps me be able to compare this side of the road with this side of the road in the spring and summer and understand if my decision making was correct. But still, saying 58 heifers grazed the house pasture for 10 days is wildly inaccurate, in my opinion. Just some other outliers. So at one of those 10 days, the cattle were in soil type 47, and it's a very, very thin topsoil layer with limestone right below it. We had a rain, and they had a significant amount of trample. This is 14 days after I moved them from this pasture, and you can see kind of the winter grass coming in. But, did I make a good decision in having them there or not? I don't know. But, I'll have to see this spring on what comes up, this summer on what comes up, and kind of adjust my decision-making process based on photographs and what I did to do a better job next year. This is a new property that we purchased, and it had, for my entire life, it had been traditionally managed. So cattle were just parked in here. I think before I was born, it was tilled for cropland, and these two wheat fields on the north side were have always been tilled for cropland. And so we transitioned these 2 wheat fields on the north side to no-till with cover crops. On these two native, quote, native pastures are severely, I call them my ICU pastures because they're in incredibly bad shape. There's just one clump of little blue stem down in the corner of this pasture. The rest of it is just really low quality natives that you have. And so the decision when we purchased the land was, do we convert it to coastal Bermuda, or do we restore it to native grasses? Well, I'm kind of a conservation freak. That's kind of where my heart is. And so we decided to restore it to native grasses. And so how do we go about that? Last year, if you look at this picture here with these heifers grazing, last year this time our wheat looked like that. This year, because of the lack of rainfall, the extreme drought that we're experiencing right now, our wheat is not doing well at all, and we're not getting any quality grazing out of these 2 pastures. So in the native pastures that we're trying to restore, abiding by those principles of soil health, I'm really focusing on that underground, the underground biology, and really trying to stimulate that. So we went ahead and we overseeded this native pasture with some nitrogen fixating legumes, looking closely at the ground from when those started coming up. Every 2 to 4 inches, there was a huge pile of worm castings coming up. So it appears as though that biology is increasing. We got a freeze, a very hard freeze, that killed all of our legumes. Our clover, I don't know if it's coming up or if we planted it too deep or what. We never got any clover that sprouted up, and we're lacking groceries for our cattle. And so what we decided to do was turn our cattle in on that pasture and unroll hay. And so the thought behind that was that it would disperse their manure in the pasture, and we were unrolling carbon to just further add to that compost layer and that mulch layer. I'm a big particle physics nut. I like particle physics podcasts. But if you think about like our cattle and where they are going to be in any given day, it's like electrons moving through the double slit experiment. It's a probability, and it's not 100%. And if it ever was 100%, I don't feel that I would be doing a very effective job. So when I say our cows are going to be in a pasture, there's a high probability that they're going to be in this pasture, but they might be in these 2 pastures. And if it doesn't rain for another month, then they might be in these 2 pastures. So when I talk about precision grazing technology, the word that I would like to substitute for precision is intuitive, and giving ranchers those shedding light on those areas that can help ranchers make better decisions, because it's a probability. It's not a 100% guarantee. I would love predictive modeling to help me make better decisions, like should I graze a pasture or not? Which pasture is best to graze now? Also, time to pasture recovery and regraze, just even a simple like aerial satellite heat map or biomass image on a per pasture basis to help me understand the impact that my cattle are having, and when the appropriate time to regraze would be. And also even like a self-learning algorithm. So like as I keep as I keep entering data into a certain platform, the algorithm kind of learns our behaviors, our biomass, takes into all those accounts that are unique to our operation, and kind of self-learns and predicts based on what happened prior years and that prior data. But overall, an explanation of data. So like if I have some platform that says, you have 14 pounds of dry matter per acre for your cattle to graze. Well, what is that taking into account to get that number, and what is that leaving out? What is the accuracy? So I would almost prefer the raw data over like a recommendation, if that makes sense. And then last, something that is critical to my operation are what are my decisions doing to carbon, water quality, and habitat conservation. So we talk about like what is this doing to our cattle health, to regrowth, but if we look at it in terms of water quality downstream, carbon, habitat for the conservation of species, those things are critical to our operation and are important things for me to know as well. And so, yeah, I think that's really all I have right now. I could again, I would love to if you guys want to come and visit, I can like go through hundreds of more scenarios and examples for you to kind of help you understand the decision-making process on what we're doing on our operation. Thank you.